Welcome back to Inside City Hall. A landmark plan to protect Manhattan's east side from the worst impacts of climate change passed the City Council today. The plan will cost an estimated $1.45 billion and includes a host of flood protection measures. Most notably, it will effectively raise East River Park by about 8 feet. The project has been years in the making and attracted no shortage of controversy as local communities have objected, among other things, to the destruction of close to 1,000 trees and a lack of interim measures should there be a severe flood during construction. Joining me now to talk more about this are Councilwoman Carlina Rivera, who represents affected areas in the East Village and Lower East Side, and Councilman Keith Powers, who represents affected areas including Stuytown and Peter Cooper Village, and much more, but those are the areas along the waterfront. Thank you both for joining us. Big day for you guys, culmination of a lot of hard work. I want you to talk a little bit about what the objections were to this plan. You would think this plan to protect vulnerable communities from climate change would be embraced with open arms, but things are never quite that simple.
Sure. It's never quite that simple. I think that for both of us as council members who lived in these communities during Hurricane Sandy, we remember what the flooding was like and what the impact and devastation was to our communities. And we both got involved in our local neighborhoods, helping our neighbors, knocking on doors, making sure that everybody in our community was protected. And now we have another opportunity here today to put up the needed protections to prevent that from ever happening again. Every land use decision, every big project like this has a lot of complicating factors, whether it's about the park space or whether it's about ensuring that we have mitigating factors in place. And I think for a lot of the communities that live in both of our districts, they want to be deeply involved in decision making here, and they have obviously a stake in it. And so we have spent the last 2 years of our lives here in the City Council trying to get this plan to where it is today, and we still have work to do to make sure that our communities are going to be protected for the long term, and we're going to have the right measures. This plan, I think, puts us on track to be one of the first communities in the city to be well protected against flood protection.
Right. And one issue was that East River Park would have been closed down for 3 years, I think, continuously. There'd be no access to the park, but that was actually changed in the final proposal, right?
This was a historic vote today for climate change protections, and this is an unprecedented investment from the city. And we wanted to make sure we were doing it right. Along the waterfront, there are 10,000 families of NYCHA. They are those frontline residents that we had to make sure we protected. So we knew that we needed to create a world-class park that protected us from a future disaster, but we also knew that people needed access to open space. These aren't families that can leave and go on vacation. We celebrate some of our most important moments in our lives in that park. So while we are creating this amazing park that is going to be resilient, the first investment of its kind in New York City, we also wanted to make sure we were phasing in construction. That was a big win in negotiations, and we're also making sure we're investing in 17 other parks, 6 NYCHA campuses, working with our community gardens, and of course creating a community advisory group that is going to keep the city accountable.
And just to give people an idea of what's actually happening here, East River Park, as we know it, with the ball fields and the tennis courts and the amphitheater, is basically going away, right? It's being entirely filled in with landfill, and then what happens then? It's basically a new park that's built on top of that?
So you mentioned that this has been years in the making, and Councilmember Powers mentioned the same. We've been working on this park since 2013. So right after Sandy, we created this diverse coalition of community-based organizations, and we won federal funds to the tune of $335 million. And we designed the park. We knew exactly what we needed. We needed the tennis courts and the ball fields and the playgrounds. So as soon as they raise the park, we're going to have all the amenities that we love and cherish, and it's going to be an amazing place for families.
And part of this, the controversy around this was that the project changed dramatically, right? Originally, the existing East River Park was going to be sort of left alone, and there was going to be a barrier, a berm built sort of along the FDR, right?
Yeah, that's right. And it's Councilmember Rivera's district, but obviously I have folks who use it. I play soccer in that area as well. But the original plan had the wall on the other side, not protecting the parks that we're talking about here, and potentially shielding the parks from the rest of the dividing between the public and where people live in the parks. This plan actually protects the park for its worth. Eventually, the plan will be put back, the park will be put back, they'll be new. They're going to replant the trees. I think they're planting over 1,000 new trees as part of it. And you're going to have a reinvigorated East River Park, not to mention I have parks in my district, Councilmember Rivera has parks in her district. They're getting much needed improvements for the short, medium, and long term. So the long-term impact thus is coastal resiliency, really important climate change protection, parks that are going to be mitigating parks. 50% or around roughly half of the East River Park kept open during the construction, and then totally new parks that would be protected against a future flood so that they're not left vulnerable during the next superstorm.
And it will be complete in 2025 is the estimate. I mentioned earlier interim measures. There was a concern anyway that it takes 6 years to build this. What happens if there's some kind of catastrophic flood between now and then? Would the community be protected?
So we know that it's urgent, right? This has to be a timely project, and we want to get it done as soon as possible. So in the project, we've actually negotiated incentives and penalties for finishing behind schedule and earlier. And we're also making sure we're preparing individuals. So we are going to launch a campaign for individual disaster preparedness. And we also have the city committed to looking at interim flood protection measures in places that they had previously deemed unfeasible. So we have that new commitment to do this analysis, to look at places where we could put these temporary flood protection measures. And we're going to make sure that all of that information is available to the public, because we want to make sure there's better transparency going forward, so we can repair that trust that was broken during the original process.
And I would just add that, as Councilmember Rivera said, this only speaks to the urgency of getting something done immediately. We are like one of the first big communities that is getting the necessary flood protection. We heard from colleagues today in the city council saying, well, when's the protections for our community coming? It ultimately only speaks to the need to get protections put in place, because even today, we know we're vulnerable, we know we're at risk, and I know that my neighbors and where I live in Stuyvesant Town, we are feeling, living right next to a waterfront, vulnerable. So it only speaks to me the need to actually get something put in place today with today's vote.
It also speaks to the amount of time and money it takes to get this done, right? I mean, how many years out from Hurricane Sandy are we? And this is a $1.5 billion project to get this kind of thing done around the city where all the vulnerable coastline is. I mean, we're talking about many, many billions of dollars, right? And many, many years.
Yeah, I wish we were quicker and faster, and we had this protections in place. I know that for our colleagues who were asking that question today, this is really important to get the necessary protections, and they're going to have to go through a process just like we did to put all the sort of investments in place and put the protection in place as well.
7 years. It's been 7 years since Sandy. We did not want to live with another 7 years of inaction, and we're hoping that this plan is going to be the model for the rest of the city. So as we're fighting for Red Hook and Far Rockaway, Brooklyn, Queens, South Bronx, making sure they can look at this plan, they can see it as a model, and then of course we can learn from it and do it even better.
One item that I thought was interesting was the idea that there would be a study on the future of the FDR. What does that mean? Is there an idea that the FDR could go away, or we're going to create more pedestrian space there?
We're trying to envision a city that is less dependent on cars and vehicle use and the emissions that come from that. And we know that we could look at the FDR drive in a different way. So we have the city committed to doing a study where we're looking at the feasibility of kind of how we repurpose the FDR. And we are hoping that includes a decking, but we'll have even more park in the future. And it could be pretty cool.
Sort of like 14th Street up here with no
We're
cars.
two of the biggest and earliest supporters for that, and I think we both are committed to looking at spaces in a different way. And in that particular one, Councilmember Rivera has fought really hard for that as part of the negotiations, and I hope the city does do a good, thorough study of ways to repurpose and reuse this space.
And I know not everybody's going to be happy with this plan. There are still constituents who aren't happy with various aspects of it. What are you hearing from your people?
Well, we welcome that community feedback. That's actually what brought us, I think, to this place and what we've accomplished and what we've negotiated in terms of community benefits. And I hope that some of those people who have expressed skepticism will be in the community advisory group. But also some of the people who had some doubts in the beginning are actually on board and supporting this plan. We have park advocacy organizations, we have environmentalists, NYCHA leaders, and we feel really good about where we're going, and we're hoping that, again, we can bring these kind of measures to other parts of the city.
All right, groundbreaking next year, so we'll see the start of one of the biggest projects in a long time in the city. All right, Councilman Keith Powers, Councilwoman Carlina Rivera, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
All right, it is time.